Hello, my name is Lauren, and I'm a registered dietitian with Rock Valley Health. Today, I'm going to be walking you through a diabetic friendly meal guide, discussing what your meals should look like, how to build a healthy diabetic friendly plate, also, some ideas of what to look for on food labels, and some healthy portion sizes in order to help control your blood sugar levels and your overall diabetes management. All right, so first we're going to discuss an overview of how to build a diabetic friendly plate. So I've created this visual here with the different color combinations, and we're going to discuss each of these food groups more in depth as well. So to build a diabetic friendly plate looks a little bit different than if you were to build a non diabetic friendly plate. So the green portion, half of your plate should ideally be non starchy vegetables. And I color coded this green because salad greens, green leafy vegetables, that's kind of the most popular non-starchy vegetable that is really easy to include half of your plate with lots of those salad greens. But we'll go in more detail with what some of those are in a little bit. So half your plate should be those non-starchy vegetables. A quarter of your plate should be the carbohydrate foods. For most people, we tend to make the carbohydrate foods like the pastas and things like that the center focus of our plate. But in the case of diabetes, we still want to include those carbohydrate foods, but just minimizing it to a quarter of your plate, which is the orange section. And then the red section of your plate is that other quarter of your plate that should be a protein source. And proteins, for the most part, have pretty much no carbohydrates or extremely minimal amounts of carbohydrates that you don't really have to worry about the carbohydrate content there for protein foods. And then the blue circle is your beverage. So ideally, we want to focus on water, unsweetened coffee or tea, or zero-calorie drinks with no added sugars. So again, moving forward, we'll go through each of these food groups in a little bit more detail. All right, so half of your plate being those non-starchy vegetables. Like I said, salad greens is a really easy way to fill up half of that plate with those salad greens and kind of chop up all of your favorite veggies in there as well. So, salad greens, carrots, celery, tomatoes, cucumber, peppers, onions, mushrooms, green beans, broccoli, and cauliflower are all options to include for those non-starchy vegetables for half of your plate. And then a quarter of your plate should be the protein food. So, like I said, protein food, you don't really have to worry about too much with the carbohydrate content because they're pretty much zero to minimal amount of carbs. But we really want to focus on lean sources of protein to help minimize the unhealthy fats, which are not good for our heart health or our cholesterol. So, lean red meats or deli meats, I always recommend trying to do 90% or higher lean beef and loin or round cuts of meat are also leaner, less unhealthy fat. And then deli meats, things like chicken or turkey, those are leaner sources as well. Um, and then, like I just said, poultry, any kind of white meat is going to be a leaner source of protein, chicken or turkey. Fish is a great healthy source of protein. Low fat cheese, doing the reduced fat cheese options will help get rid of that unhealthy and minimize that unhealthy fat. Eggs are a great source of protein and don't really have any carbohydrates. Beans and tofu are some more plant based protein options. And then things like nuts and nut butters can also contribute to your protein intake. But if you're focusing on building a diabetic friendly plate for your meals, most often for most people is that's going to include more of like the leaner red meat, poultry, fish, things like that for a quarter of your plate. So the next quarter of your plate is going to be those carbohydrate foods. I always recommend for diabetics, it's still important to include those carbohydrate foods, but just healthier sources of those carbohydrate foods. So whole grains are going to be the biggest thing to focus on. Whole grains have more fiber, which helps manage our blood sugar levels and keep them at a healthier level and also helps keep us full. So if you're doing more whole grain sources of carbohydrates, things like whole grain pastas, whole grain breads, looking for that word whole either in the ingredient list or on the front of the package. Brown rice is also a whole grain. Um, and then also part of this carbohydrate food group are corn tortillas. Fruit does contain carbohydrates. So if you are going to have fruit, making sure you stick to a quarter of your plate for that. And then starchy vegetables, there are different starchy vegetables that do include carbs more so than the non-starchy vegetables. So that's why we want to limit them to a quarter of our plate. These are things like potatoes, corn, peas, beans, and squash. And then also important to note, if you choose milk as your beverage, that also counts as a carbohydrate food. So moving on to what you should look for on food labels for things that are diabetic friendly. So first off, always looking at that serving size. I am a big fan of not being afraid to get the measuring cups out at home, getting the 1 cup or half cup, or even measuring out the 2/3 cup, especially beneficial for things like cereals that we tend to kind of overserve ourselves on. And then for diabetics specifically, I talk a lot about the total carbohydrate. This is the main thing to focus on. This includes all types of carbohydrates that are in that particular food. Fiber, all types of starches, sugars, those are all types of carbohydrates. And they've already done the math on the label here, and added all of those amounts together to give you that total carbohydrate amount in grams. So looking at that total carbohydrate amount to give you an idea of that there. Um, and also, I wanted to mention the term net carbs. This is something you might see on a lot of, diabetic friendly, low carb, you know, food products. It might just say, zero net carbs on the front of the package. But this term actually is not really regulated. It's, in my opinion, as a dietitian, just kind of a marketing scheme to confuse a lot of people. Because what the net carbs are is they take that total carbohydrate and subtract out the fiber. Because fiber technically doesn't get digested by your body, but it's still a type of carbohydrate that is beneficial for your blood sugar. And so we still want to make sure we're looking at all of the types of carbohydrates, the fibers, and then the added sugars, and just keeping that total carbohydrate in mind because there are a lot of food products that say they have, 4 grams of net carbs, and then you turn the label around and there's actually 20 grams of carbs. And you're like, wait, I thought it said 4 grams of net carbs. It's basically they've subtracted out the fiber. So I would just recommend looking at the total carbohydrate, not the net carbs. And then also looking at underneath the total carbohydrate, the amount of added sugar. This is something that has gotten added to nutrition facts labels underneath total sugars just in the past 5 years or so. Added sugars are basically pretty much what they sound like. You're adding sugar directly into the product. So think about, adding sugar like if you were making a chocolate chip cookie recipe. So these are sugars that we really want to try to minimize, and my recommendation is just looking for products with 10 grams or less per serving, like in this example. That's an easy way to kind of just make sure you're minimizing the amount of added sugar in your diet. And then also important to look at protein. Like I said, protein foods for the most part, anything that's high in protein, usually is going to be pretty minimal on the carbohydrate amount. And also protein helps keep you full, especially for any like snack foods or things like that. I always recommend looking for something with at least a few grams of protein, a few grams of fiber, like this example, because that's going to help keep you full and not cause, such a large spike in your blood sugar throughout the day. And then also lastly here to look at the saturated fat. That is just a general recommendation I give for anyone to keep this amount in mind because, like I said, saturated fat, focusing on the leaner meats, things like that. Saturated fat is the unhealthy type of fat that is just not good for our cholesterol and our heart health. All right, so next we're going to go through some diabetic friendly portion sizes for carbohydrate foods. These are a little bit different than what I would recommend for general portion sizes for someone who's not diabetic. But notice we're not going to be eliminating any food groups completely here. We're just going to be being more mindful of the portion sizes that you're having of each food group. So first up, the grains, limiting to 1 slice of bread, a quarter of a large bagel, a third of a cup of cooked pasta or rice. This is kind of important to note because I feel like, pasta, carbohydrate rich things like that tend to be the center of our plate. Where if you're going back to that quarter of your plate being carbohydrate rich foods, that's going to be more of like that third of a cup. Recommendation for pasta or rice, half of a hamburger or hot dog bun, half to 3/4 cup of cereal. My recommendation there, just get the measuring cup out and follow the recommendation of what's on the serving size. Usually, it's within that half to third cup, 3/4 cup range, but just keeping that in mind. And then half a cup of oatmeal, one small tortilla or two taco shells if you're making tacos. And then fruit, this is the one scenario where I do recommend just limiting your fruit intake just a little bit, just not going overboard and eating, 5 apples a day kind of a thing, because fruit does have carbohydrates in them that impacts your blood sugar. So these are kind of the recommendations for diabetic friendly fruit options to make sure you're still getting your fruit in, you're getting that nutrition in, but just minimizing the portion sizes for your blood sugar. So one small fresh fruit, half of a medium banana, 17 grapes, a cup of melon or berries, or if it's canned or frozen fruit, trying to limit to half a cup. And then dried fruit is really important that you minimize this to just about a couple tablespoons. Think of it as more of just kind of sprinkling it on maybe on top of yogurt or something like that, adding it kind of as like a topping or mixing it in with like a trail mix or something because dried fruit is a really concentrated source of added sugars. So we really want to minimize the portion size there. So then the starchy vegetables, like I said earlier, those do contain carbohydrates. So beans, peas, and corn, we want to limit to about half a cup as well for any kind of potatoes, white potatoes or sweet potatoes. And then in terms of baked potatoes, trying to just do a quarter of a large baked potato is the recommendation there. And then dairy products do also have carbohydrates. So 3/4 of a cup of non-fat yogurt or 0% or skim milk yogurt. Um, that's going to have less saturated fat, and then aiming for yogurts that have less than 10 grams of added sugar. And then 1 cup of low-fat milk, and then if you are doing any of those flavored or sweetened non-dairy milks like or oat milks, those sweetened varieties can have some added sugars as well, so just being mindful of that and limiting it to 1 cup. So for snack foods, pretty much all of these kind of snack foods tend to have carbs. I just recommend sticking to that serving size on the label, um, measuring it out, like I said, with the measuring cups or buying the prepackaged individualized portions or getting the measuring cup out and putting it into little Ziploc baggies to measure it out. Um, The appropriate serving for popcorn, which is actually a whole grain, it has a little bit more fiber in it, which is beneficial for your blood sugar, is 3 cups. And Skinny Pop or Boom Chicka Pop are two recommendations that I like for popcorn. Not a lot of additives or extra salt or fat or anything like that. And then I did include sweets and desserts because we all love sweets and desserts and still want to include that in our lifestyle. It's just minimizing them a little bit for your blood sugar. So, ice cream or frozen yogurt, trying to limit that to half of a cup. In terms of any baked goods, cakes, brownies, trying to do 1 to 2 inch square of that. Cookies, 2 small cookies or a quarter of a large cookie, and then really watching out for different condiments. Those can have a lot of extra carbs and add up there. So things like jellies, syrups, honey, coffee creamer is a big one. Don't be afraid to just get out that tablespoon and measure it directly to make sure you're not going overboard there. So this slide I wanted to include, I think it would be good to note the foods that do not have carbohydrates after we've talked about all the foods that do have carbohydrates. So most protein foods, like I said earlier, don't have carbs as well as those non-starchy vegetables. So that's why when we're talking about building a diabetic friendly plate, we want to focus on our non-starchy vegetables being half of the plate and our protein foods being a quarter of the plate and then the carbs only being that other quarter. Because if you're focusing on building your meals more with protein and non-starchy vegetables, you're not having an overloaded amount of carbohydrates and not causing um, your blood sugar to go out of control with overdoing the amount of carbs at your meals. So, protein foods are going to be more chicken, beef, pork, fish, eggs, tofu, cheese, butter and sour cream also does not contain carbs. Avocados do not contain carbs. And then most nuts and seeds don't contain carbohydrates as well. All right, so putting all of these recommendations into place, I thought I'd include a diabetic friendly sample menu just to give everyone some easy ideas. So breakfast, doing a Greek yogurt bowl. Again, we have a healthy combination of all the food groups. We're not eliminating anything with these menu items. We're just scaling back on the portions for the carbohydrate rich items. So, non fat Greek yogurt, a whole grain unsweetened cereal, something with less than 10 grams of added sugar for the yogurt in a cereal, and just putting strawberries and some almonds on top, making sure you're getting all the food groups. This has a great amount of fiber and protein to help keep you full and minimize that blood sugar spike throughout the day. And then lunch, I am a big fan of tuna. It has healthy fats, it's a great source of protein, pretty much no carbs. Pairing it with whole grain crackers, things like Triscuits or wheat thins, low fat string cheese also is a minimal source of carbs. Um, this is an example of doing a small apple, not having, a larger apple with, more carbohydrates. Um, but fruit is, again, the healthier sources of carbohydrates. It has the fiber and the vitamins and minerals to go along with it. And fiber is beneficial for controlling your blood sugar and keeping you full. So like I said earlier, we still want to include those fruits, those healthier sources of carbs, but not go overboard with the portions. So just a small apple here, half cup of carrots and half cup of snap peas. I am a big fan of just snacking on veggies, pairing them with hummus or a Greek yogurt based dip, and measuring that out to just a couple tablespoons. So moving on to dinner, this is just a simple stir fry recipe. Chicken or lean beef. A good portion for this is 3 ounces, which is the palm of your hand or a deck of cards. A cup of brown rice, and broccoli, green bean, onions, whatever veggies you like to this too. Just making sure you're getting the protein, the non-starchy veggies, still throwing the carbohydrate with the brown rice in there, but it's a healthy source of carbs with the fiber. And then using, olive oil instead of butter to help get rid of those unhealthy fats, and then just being mindful of the portion for the sauce. And then I'm always a big fan of just whenever we can throw a side of fruit in there. 1 cup of berries, for example. This is just an example of that. And then evening snack. Not everyone has an evening snack, but I thought I'd throw this product in there for a recommendation. I pretty much share this product with everyone I work with, diabetic or not. Yasso brand pretty much is available at most stores by the ice cream novelties. They have ice cream sandwiches and frozen yogurt bars. So the Yasso brand is all frozen yogurt based. So and it still tastes very rich and creamy. They have lots of fun flavors, and it's all made from Greek yogurt, so less unhealthy fat. And they're portion sized with about 100 calories per bar, and not too overboard in terms of the unhealthier carbs and added sugars. So the Yasso brand is definitely a dietitian recommended product, something I would recommend you check out if you, especially if you want a little sweet treat after dinner. And then lastly, I thought I would include just some diabetes friendly snack ideas for, some quick grab and go options to throw some things in between your meals to help support that healthy blood sugar throughout the day. Rule of thumb for healthy snacks is just making sure you at least get a couple different food groups into your snack, combining carbs and protein. We still want a healthy amount of carbohydrates to support your energy levels. Um, Carbohydrates are our body's main energy source, so we don't want to eliminate them from our diet completely. Um, and healthier sources of carbs that have more fiber, the fruits and the whole grains, paired with a protein source, which also helps keep us full but has minimal carbs. These two together are going to help keep us full, help keep us focused, and help support a healthy blood sugar throughout the day. So, a small banana or apple with peanut butter. I'm a big fan of the Chobani Complete or Two Good yogurt drinks. Those are grab and go, still a healthy amount of carbohydrates. Turkey jerky or turkey jerky sticks have no carbs or quick, easy options. I have a few brands listed there that I like. Hard boiled eggs and whole grain crackers. This is a great combo. Hard boiled eggs have no carbs, and Triscuits and wheat thins are pretty popular options for whole grain crackers. Sun chips are also a whole grain option. Pairing that with salsa and low fat cottage cheese and fruit is another easy option, and also kind of making your own trail mix, doing dried fruit and unsalted nuts. And also, there's a lot of protein in granola bars out there. I always recommend looking for ones with less than 10 grams of added sugar. So a few brands I like are the Kind bars, Nature Valley, or RX bars. So that concludes our overview of how to build diabetic friendly meals and diabetes friendly snack ideas as well. I hope this overview gave you some practical tips about how you incorporate diabetic friendly portion sizes throughout your day to day and hopefully can help you support your healthy blood sugar levels and overall diabetes management. So, thanks for watching.